What the hell is that on her neck? The words tore through the hangar like a gunshot. The sharp, mocking tone turned every head, silencing the buzz of idle chatter. A dozen young sailors froze mid-step, their laughter dying in their throats. Captain Daniel Reeves stood rigid beneath the harsh fluorescent lights, his voice echoing off the steel walls, cutting clean through the chill air of Naval Air Station Coronado. His target, a small, quiet woman in a navy blue jumpsuit, did not move. Before we get started, be sure to subscribe to the Veteran Story channel so you never miss these fascinating tales of courage. And let us know in the comments where you're watching today. Master Chief Petty Officer Evelyn Carter was bent over the open diagnostic console of an F-35C Lightning II, her hands moving with unhurried precision. She wiped the touchscreen clean with a lint-free cloth, the motion slow, deliberate, almost reverent. The murmurs around her shifted uneasily. They all knew her name, though few had ever heard her voice. To the maintenance crews, she was a quiet legend, a ghost on the flight line who solved problems no manual could explain. Captain Reeves, recently promoted and eager to assert control, saw none of that. What he saw was a breach of protocol. A silver pin on Carter's collar, small and unassuming, a circular disc engraved with a complex knot. It wasn't a standard issue decoration, and that made it, in his eyes, unacceptable. "Master Chief, that pin is unauthorized," he barked, voice slicing through the tense quiet. "Remove it, now." Carter didn't look up. Her silence wasn't defiance, it was focus, the steady kind that made lesser men uneasy. Around them, sailors shifted their weight, glancing at each other with a mix of dread and disbelief. No one dared intervene. Only Admiral Jonathan Thorne, standing at the far end of the hangar with a small entourage, watched without expression. His weathered face gave away nothing, but deep in his eyes flickered something old. A recognition, perhaps, or a memory best left buried. Captain Reeves pressed on, his irritation swelling. "Did you hear me, Master Chief? This isn't a suggestion." The words came brittle now, forced through clenched teeth. The woman still didn't flinch. Instead, she adjusted a cable connection on the jet, the movement so smooth it felt choreographed. Her calm became a mirror, reflecting back his insecurity, amplifying it. The silence between them grew unbearable. Then, as if the hangar itself had decided to intervene, a high-pitched alarm split the air. Red lights flared across the console. The F-35C system screamed in electronic agony, flooding the display with cascading error codes. Technicians leapt to action, their voices overlapping in panic. "What's going on?" Reeves demanded. A young lieutenant, face pale, stammered, "Total systems failure, sir. Avionics buses offline, primary, secondary, all of them. It's like the aircraft's nervous system just died." The hangar transformed into chaos. Boots clattering, shouts bouncing off metal, the shrill alarm unrelenting. And through it all, Evelyn Carter stood motionless. Her sea-gray eyes tracked the red stream of data, her mind working faster than the systems themselves. Then quietly she moved. Without waiting for an order, she stepped forward, laid a hand against the aircraft's fuselage, and closed her eyes. The gesture was intimate, human, out of place amid the machines and wires. Then she reached into her tool belt and withdrew not a digital scanner, but a small insulated screwdriver and a handmade jumper wire. No one understood what she was doing, but something in her steady movements made them all stop talking. "Master Chief," Reeves shouted. "Back away from the jet." "That's an order." She ignored him. A panel snapped open beneath her practiced hands, an unmarked section none of the crew had ever seen. She adjusted two hidden wires, her motions fluid and certain, and with one decisive click connected the jumper wire. Instantly, the alarm stopped. The hangar fell silent. The red lights vanished. The F-35C system screens glowed green again, fully operational. The crew froze, eyes wide. In 30 seconds, she had done what none of them could. Admiral Thorne stepped forward at last, his gaze fixed not on the revived aircraft, but on the small silver pin that had started it all. He spoke softly, yet every soul in the hangar heard him. "The Ariadne's thread pin." A hush fell deeper still. Reeves blinked, confused, as the Admiral's voice hardened. "Captain, pull up Master Chief Carter's full-service record. Level 5 clearance." And that was the moment the balance of power in the hangar shifted forever. Captain Reeves hesitated, fingers trembling slightly as he entered the Admiral's command code into his tablet. Level 5 clearance was no small thing. It pierced straight through the classified layers of a sailor's history, the kind of access that required both authority and trust. As the system processed the request, the hum of servers filled the silence, a cold mechanical heartbeat that made every second feel longer than it was. When the file appeared, Reeves blinked in confusion. The screen overflowed with ribbons of commendations, sealed operations, and dates redacted in black. His mouth went dry. At the bottom, there was a small restricted addendum marked only with a stylized labyrinth. He glanced up uncertainly, but the Admiral's gaze was unwavering. "Open it," Thorne said quietly. A warning message flashed. "Security breach risk. Top secret clearance required." Reeves confirmed the override. The screen filled with text, a history written in silence and sacrifice. "Project Ariadne," he read aloud, voice cracking slightly. "Naval Aviation Advanced Weapons Skunk Works Division, 2006 to 2013. Lead non-commissioned systems engineer. Primary designer, Cerberus Avionics Integration Bus." The hangar seemed to tilt. The realization dawned like sunrise. Slow, brilliant, undeniable. She hadn't just repaired the jet. She had built the very system that had failed. A stunned murmur rippled through the room. Technicians looked at one another, their faces pale with awe. Reeves swallowed hard, continuing to read. "Commendations. Legion of Merit, Navy and Marine Corps Medal for Heroism, Distinguished Service Cross." His voice trailed off when he reached the last entry. "Awarded the Ariadne's thread. Granted by order of the Secretary of the Navy to the 5 founding members of Project Ariadne. Authorized for wear in perpetuity." The tablet slipped from his hands and clattered to the floor, the sharp sound echoing like a gunshot through the hangar. The pin he'd ridiculed moments ago wasn't unauthorized. It was one of the rarest symbols of service in naval history. Admiral Thorne's eyes, cool and deliberate, turned to Reeves. "Captain," he said, his tone deceptively mild, "you owe this woman more than an apology. You owe her your respect." Then, to everyone's astonishment, the Admiral stepped forward, boots ringing against the polished floor. He stopped before Master Chief Carter, squared his shoulders, and raised his hand in a slow, flawless salute. The hangar went utterly still, an admiral saluting an enlisted sailor. It wasn't ceremony. It wasn't theater. It was reverence. "Master Chief Carter," Thorne said, his voice carrying with measured clarity, "on behalf of the United States Navy, I offer my apologies for this insult. It's an honor to have you in my fleet." Carter returned the salute with quiet precision. "Thank you, Admiral." Her words were calm, measured, entirely free of pride. Yet something in her tone carried a weight that settled over every witness, the weight of a lifetime of silent excellence. For a long moment, no one breathed. The simple exchange had stripped every pretense of hierarchy bare, leaving only respect in its purest form. Then Thorne turned back to Reeves, his voice colder than the steel around them. "You are a commander, Captain, not a bureaucrat," he said evenly. "Your duty is to know your people, not just their ranks but their stories. You mistook compliance for leadership. You saw a rulebook and missed the living history standing before you." Reeves's face was ashen, his lips trembling. "Understood, Admiral," he managed, voice barely above a whisper. He turned to Carter, his arrogance collapsed into shame. "Master Chief, I'm sorry. I was wrong." She met his gaze with quiet composure. Her nod was small, but it was enough. A silent acknowledgement that the lesson had landed, that humility had been earned. Later, long after the Admiral left and the crew returned to their stations, whispers began to ripple across the base. What happened in Hangar 4 that morning would not stay confined to those steel walls. It would become a story, retold in mess halls and barracks, across ships and squadrons. Not a tale of reprimand, but of revelation. They would call it the Hangar Bay Salute. And it would grow not like wildfire, but like a tide, steady, unstoppable, reshaping everything it touched. The story spread quietly at first, whispered between night shifts and maintenance crews, told over steaming mugs of coffee and the hum of idling engines. The Hangar Bay Salute became more than gossip, it became legend. Sailors repeated it with reverence, careful not to embellish too much as though to do so might diminish its truth. They spoke of the captain's arrogance, the aircraft's impossible failure, and the woman who had revived it with nothing but instinct and wire. But most of all, they spoke of that final moment, the Admiral's salute to a Master Chief. Within weeks, every base from Norfolk to Pearl Harbor knew her name, Master Chief Evelyn Carter. To the new recruits, she was a symbol, a living reminder that authority without understanding was hollow, that rank meant nothing without respect. Yet to Carter herself, the sudden fame was nothing but noise. She continued her routine exactly as before, quiet mornings, coffee in hand, walking the hangar before sunrise. Her boots echoed across the empty floor as she inspected each jet, running her fingers along the cold metal skin, listening for the faint vibrations that spoke volumes to those who knew how to hear them. She didn't seek conversation. She didn't want applause. Her world was made of circuits and steel, of calm beneath pressure. But change had already begun to ripple outward. Captain Reeves was the first to feel it. The dressing down he'd received from Admiral Thorne had burned through every layer of his pride. Yet in its ashes, something else took root: understanding. He started showing up early, walking the decks with his hands in his pockets, not barking orders but asking questions. He learned the rhythm of his people's work, the subtle language of fatigue and concentration that could never be captured in a report. At first, the crew avoided him, unsure of his motives. But over time they saw the difference. He listened, not to respond, but to learn. He no longer quoted regulations. He sought solutions. His transformation became another quiet legend whispered alongside Carter's. One morning, Reeves approached her as she calibrated an avionics panel. He didn't carry a tablet or clipboard, just a genuine curiosity. "Master Chief," he asked carefully, "I've been reviewing turbine resonance frequencies, but the numbers don't match what the manuals say." "Why is that?" Carter didn't look up from her work. "Because the manuals were written in a lab," she replied. "The machines live out here." It was a simple answer, but it struck him like a revelation. He nodded slowly. "Then I guess I've got a lot more listening to do." "You're learning," she said, a faint smile ghosting across her lips. That moment, quiet, brief, and unrecorded, marked the real shift at Coronado. Reeves stopped being the man who quoted paragraphs. He became the officer who understood context. His humility spread through his command, reshaping the culture itself. By the year's end, the maintenance division had changed. Mistakes were still made, but fewer. Repairs were faster. Communication sharper. The young sailors began to emulate Carter's calm precision and Reeves's newfound humility. They called it the Carter method, though she never approved of the name. To her, it was simply common sense. Listen, observe, and act with purpose. Her legend wasn't forged by speeches or medals. It was written in the small, wordless exchanges that defined a team's rhythm. When something broke, her crew didn't panic. They paused, thought, and fixed it. When a procedure didn't make sense, they asked why instead of blindly following it. And always. In the corner of that massive hangar gleamed the glass case. Inside it, a single wire with 2 alligator clips, the one Carter had used that day. A brass plaque beneath it read simply, "Think outside the manual." New recruits were brought there during orientation. The senior chiefs would tell them the story, standing before the wire as if before a relic. "Remember," they'd say, "this isn't about rebellion. It's about respect. The kind you earn by knowing your craft better than anyone else." The hangar had become a cathedral of sorts, its lessons carried not in sermons, but in the quiet competence of those who worked within it. And Evelyn Carter, the woman who started it all, remained unchanged, steady as ever, her focus never on glory, but on the work that still needed doing. Months turned into a year, and the rhythm of Naval Air Station Coronado evolved with quiet grace. What had begun as an incident of humiliation and revelation had grown into something far greater, a transformation of culture. They called it the Carter effect now. Though she loathed the title, still she couldn't deny what she saw each morning. A hangar alive with curiosity instead of fear, initiative instead of blind obedience. Where once there had been rigid silence, now came the low hum of conversation. Technicians comparing theories, officers seeking advice, apprentices daring to ask questions that once would have been dismissed as insubordination. And in the heart of it all, Evelyn Carter worked as always, quiet, focused, steady. It was Petty Officer Anna Morales who caught her attention first, a young avionics tech barely 2 years into her service, her eyes bright and restless with hunger to understand. Carter often found her still in the hangar long after the others had gone, hunched over old circuit schematics, grease smudged across her cheek, lips moving silently as she tried to decode the language of machines. One night, Carter approached her. Morales startled, snapping to attention, but Carter waved her down. "Relax," she said simply, setting a worn leather journal on the workbench. Morales glanced at it. The pages were filled with hand-drawn diagrams, equations scrawled in tight, deliberate handwriting, coffee stains darkening the corners. The Cerberus system wasn't born in a lab, Carter said, her tone softer than usual. It started in notebooks like this, sketched, tested, rewritten 100 times. What you see on the screen is just the end of a conversation that began on paper. Morales blinked. "This is yours?" Carter nodded. It's time someone else kept writing it. That moment changed everything for Morales. She became Carter's quiet shadow, learning not just how to repair, but how to think. Carter never lectured. She observed. She corrected with a glance or a raised brow. She asked questions that forced Morales to slow down and see the system as a living organism rather than a checklist of components. By the end of the year, Morales was teaching others. The culture had come full circle. Evelyn Carter's legacy wasn't in medals or citations. It was in the minds she shaped, the calm she taught by example. Captain Reeves noticed it too. The change in the air, the shift in tone, the new confidence pulsing through his command. He had learned that leadership wasn't about volume, but vision. His officers had stopped quoting regulations in briefings. Instead, they began their discussions with a new phrase. "Let's check with the chiefs." The metrics reflected the shift. Maintenance downtime dropped by nearly a third. Flight readiness surged to levels the base had never seen. But the numbers weren't what mattered most. What mattered was the way his people carried themselves, their pride and quiet competence, their refusal to let arrogance take root again. Sometimes, when Reeves passed the display case with the jumper wire, he would pause and look at it. The plaque below, "Think outside the manual," had begun to tarnish slightly around the edges the way metal does when it's been touched by too many reverent hands. He'd smile faintly and remember that awful morning, the echo of the Admiral's words, the shame that had nearly crushed him, and the gift that shame had given him. Carter, for her part, never changed. She still refused interviews. She ignored the stories about her circulating online, the exaggerated retellings that painted her as some mythic figure. To her it was simple. Machines broke. People made mistakes. You fixed both with patience, yet even she couldn't stop the tide of her legend. New recruits came from other bases just to train under her. Some called her the mechanic monk, others Steel Mother. She dismissed both titles with a dry smile. "I'm just the one who listens to the metal," she'd say. And those who'd been there that day, the ones who'd watched the Admiral salute, knew the truth. She didn't just fix planes. She mended people too. Her legacy was no longer just a story whispered in hangars. It was becoming doctrine. Time, as it always does, moved forward. Seasons changed, commanders rotated out, new recruits cycled in. But the story of that day in Hangar 4 refused to fade. It became part of the base's bloodstream, passed from mouth to mouth until it was no longer a mere event, but a lesson woven into the fabric of the Navy itself. Captain Reeves, older now, quieter, had made it his personal duty to preserve that lesson. Every few months, when a new wave of officers arrived, he gathered them in the ready room before the glass case containing the simple jumper wire. The light caught on the polished clips as he spoke, his voice low but firm. "I want you to remember something," he would begin. "Your greatest asset isn't your rank. It's the people who've lived long enough to make the mistakes you haven't yet imagined. The chiefs, the petty officers, the quiet ones, they've forgotten more than you've learned. Listen to them. Trust them. If you do, you'll never be blindsided by your own arrogance the way I was." He never spared himself in the telling. The room would always fall silent as he described that moment of humiliation. The red lights flashing, the alarms scream, the woman's calm hands at work while he shouted. And when he reached the part about Admiral Thorne's salute, his voice would soften. "That was the moment I understood what real authority looks like," he'd say. "It doesn't shout. It doesn't threaten. It acts and lets the results speak." Some of the young officers would nod, others would look away, uncomfortable with the weight of it. But all of them would remember. They always did. Evelyn Carter retired 2 years later. No grand ceremony, no band, no speeches. Just a small gathering of the few she had mentored, Morales among them. The Admiral had long since moved on to a Pentagon post, and Captain Reeves stood quietly in his dress whites, hands clasped behind his back. Carter shook each technician's hand, offering no speeches, no lessons, only a steady gaze that carried all the words she didn't need to say. When it came time for her to leave, Morales stopped her near the hangar doors. "Master Chief," she said softly, "what do I do when I don't know the answer?" Carter smiled faintly. "You listen. The machine always tells you what it needs, you just have to be quiet enough to hear it." And with that, she walked away, sunlight spilling over the tarmac as the hangar swallowed her footsteps. In the years that followed, Morales would rise through the ranks, known for her calm in crisis, her refusal to raise her voice even when chaos raged. She kept Carter's old journal on her desk, its pages now filled with her own notes and sketches, a living continuation of the story that had started decades earlier. The technicians under her command adopted the same creed: competence first, pride last. By then, the phrase "think outside the manual" had become official policy across several bases, printed on banners and training materials. But those who'd known the origin smiled quietly when they saw it. They understood the truth beneath the slogan, that it wasn't about defiance but about courage. The courage to trust what you know, to stand steady when the world doubts you, and to let silence speak louder than anger. On quiet nights, the hangar still seemed to hum with her presence. The air carried the faint echo of that morning, the piercing alarm, the sudden hush, the click of a wire, and the Admiral's steady salute. And in that echo lived the heart of the story, that true legacy isn't a monument or a medal. It's a chain of hands passing down knowledge, one generation to the next. It's the calm professionalism that outlasts applause, the humility that endures after the uniforms are folded away. Evelyn Carter never sought fame, but she became a standard nonetheless, a quiet star guiding those who work in silence, those who fix what others break, those who lead not with rank, but with respect, because in the end, true greatness doesn't need to announce itself. It's written in the hum of machines that work perfectly, in the steady rhythm of a hangar running smooth, and in the quiet confidence of those who learn from the best that real power whispers. And somewhere, in a story retold on the Veteran Story Channel, her name continues to echo, not as a hero, but as a reminder that the loudest authority isn't always the truest one, and that courage often wears the face of calm,